Suspending the writ of habeas corpus. Let that sink in. Yeah, Lincoln Project? What did Abraham Lincoln do? Oh, there you go. 1863 Proclamation 104, suspension of the writ of habeas corpus throughout the entire United States. He suspended habeas corpus multiple times and arrested 40,000 dissidents. It wasn't just prisoners of war. Even Stephen B. Oates, author of Abraham Lincoln, The Man Behind the Myths, who was a liberal, was able to muster up plenty of information about Lincoln violating civil rights, using foreigners and others against American citizens, breaking up protests, turning them into riots, and making the war basically inevitable.
People heavily misunderstand Abraham Lincoln, his intentions, and the context of the Civil War. They definitely misunderstand Henry Clay and the American Colonization Society and the founders of the country and most of the laws and court cases of the Supreme Court up until even the 1930s, but especially everything from 1855 up until 1892. In Abraham Lincoln's first annual address to Congress, he said that he wanted to remigrate all freed black people to Africa, as was established by James Monroe, the fifth president of the United States. They had Liberia. He reiterated this concern in August of 1862 on his address on colonization to a committee of colored men, where he says that the primary goal of freeing slaves should be to send them to Africa. They allotted $600,000 for this purpose, which at that time would be a substantial amount. Now, some say that he was sad that blacks hadn't been given suffrage in states like Louisiana. Additionally, during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, he definitely showed that he had no interest in giving blacks suffrage, nor making them politically and legally equal to whites. He said, "I am not now, nor have I ever been in favor of bringing about in any way the societal and political equality of the black and white races," which was met with applause. "That I am, nor ever have been in favor of making them voters or jurors, nor qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say in addition to that, that there is a physical difference between black and white races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races from living together on terms of social and political equality. And is as much as they cannot so live, they will do remain together. There must be a position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. I am upon this occasion, I do not perceive that because the white man is to have this superior position, that he should be denied, that the black man should be denied everything. I do not understand that because I do not want a woman of color as a slave, that I must necessarily want her as a wife." Many people applauded that and laughed at that. I am not going to enter in large on this subject, but I have never had the least apprehension that I or my friends would want to marry them if there was no law to keep us from doing so, to which more people laughed. But as Judge Douglas and his friends seemed to be in great apprehension that they might, if there were no law to keep them from doing it, even more laughter, I give them the most solemn pledge that I will, to the very last, stand by the law of this state, which forbids the marrying of white and black people. Even more laughter and applause. I will add one further, which is this. I do not understand if there is any place where an alteration of social and political relations of the black and white races can be made except in the state legislature, not in Congress of the United States, and as I do not really apprehend the approach of any such thing myself, he has no interest in doing so. That was the 7th debate in Alton, Illinois, October 15th, 1858. He stood by the Dred Scott decision, even if it was shaky. He's saying that he supports the fugitive slave law. It's a right fixed in the Constitution, but can only be made available to them through legislation. I defy any man to make an argument that will justify unfriendly legislation to deprive a slaveholder of his right to hold his slave in a territory that will not equally, in all its length, breadth, and thickness, furnish an argument for nullifying the fugitive slave law. Why, there is not such an abolitionist in the nation as Douglas, after all. Into the war, Lincoln wanted to draft more soldiers. They were losing so many people. So those who were unable to pay would be drafted. But if you could pay for a certain amount per year, then you'd be able to avoid service. Many people who were in labor wanted to strike against this. They wanted to revolt against Lincoln's laws. The excise taxes were making them broke. They were unable to afford paying their way out of service. And so many of these laborers assembled a plan to attack Arsenal. Lincoln's government punished people who went on strike. They heavily increased immigration, making it so if you were to protest against your job conditions, then you would just lose your job and you'd be unable to find a job. And then when white workers were striking over this new law, they used black workers to break the strikes, and they would simply work for lower wages. When 3,000 longshoremen went on strike for higher wages, blacks with police protection took their places. When the government began drafting these unemployed whites, they looked upon it as adding insult to injury. They had been displaced from their jobs and were forced to go fight in a war to set more people free. Historian Ivar Bernstein says that it was mostly that they were proletariatized, that they were oppressed workers, unable to afford better conditions, and it was entirely economical and had nothing to do with the social implications of migrating many freed blacks into their neighborhoods, into the poorer communities, and replacing them at their jobs. It also had nothing to do with the influx of new immigration, using both police forces and marshals, and then the U.S. Marines, in addition to intelligence agencies and private investigators investigating the total number of participants in the riots and the ringleaders. They thought there were 30,000 white men protesting against the draft. So they assembled batteries of artillery and infantry to suppress the rebellion. And President Lincoln did, not only authorizing the use of the marshals and the Marines, but also calling back a unit from the war to suppress white protesters in New York. So he suspends habeas corpus. He's accused of being racist and making crude jokes, and he wants to use the military against civilians who are protesting. I don't know, Lincoln Project. Let's let that sink in.